This portion of the lecture is part 3. This is a continuation from parts 1 and 2 on family trends and patterns, and it talks about the experiences and perspectives of parents. So something else to consider when we look at what families are experiencing is that we all, as we go through our lives, have very diverse experiences. For one thing, there's among families, there are many aspects of diversity such as race, ethnicity, religion, cultural background, immigration status, environmental conditions, economic status certainly is always there. And so parenting is a diverse experience kind of based on some of those factors as well. And so we do need to remember this because one of the hardest things about working with families is that we come to the table already with our opinions about how families should work. Everybody has an opinion about how families should work, how parenting should be, or how children should be treated. It's one of the reasons that one of your key assignments is to write your own cultural autobiography, and that's because we all bring to the table expectations of how we think other people should do things. And one of the things that we do need to remember is that our own lives take us where we go and bring us to these opinions that we have and these practices that we hold dear and these traditions that we consider to be important and these practices that we engage in. So do try to remember that. We also need to remember that parents have different things that may create different environmental conditions for them and that give them experiences that you yourself might not have had. Here are some external factors that can create quite a bit of stress. Parenting, as we know, is a stressful experience anyway, but some of the external factors, the things that we cannot control that create stress for all of us as parents, poverty definitely is the ultimate stressor. There is really hardly anything more stressful than worrying about how you're going to keep a roof over your head or put bread in your children's mouths. Many people in the United States suffer from what we call food insecurity. It means they're not sure how they're going to how they're going to pay for that kind of next meal or next week's groceries. That is an extreme source of stress for some families. Work demands are very stressful, and particularly in an economic downturn where people feel afraid that they could be easily replaced, where they feel afraid that if they were replaced they wouldn't get another job. Work demands will create a lot of stress because folks don't want to lose their job, and that's really hard. Family structure can create stress. Being a single parent is extremely stressful. All of the literature points in that direction, and probably all of the people that you know that have experienced single parenting will tell you that it's very hard. Parenting is such a solitary experience. Even under the best of circumstances, there are moments where people feel like it's overwhelming, and when you are on your own, then that's also very difficult. Having conflicting roles in terms of what you're supposed to do and where you're supposed to be, and I have to pick my child up on time at the child care center, but I also have to work late. These are things that do create stress, and having any kind of demand on your time. So parents that are very stressed out might not always respond favorably to a ton of questionnaires that come home or a ton of things that that they need to then do at home with their child. It can, you have to really convince folks that there's some kind of value in that for them, especially if they're already stressed out. And then other things about parenthood as an emotional experience. Why do people choose to become parents then? We've talked about all of these things in this lecture, that can be tricky and even hard. And why then do people choose to become parents? Well, in the research, people report that they become parents because in some ways it's sort of an expansion of self. Oh, I want to have a little girl and do the things with my little girl that I did as a little girl, or have a little boy that looks like my partner, that will do the things that he did when he was a little boy. Those are an aspect of expansion of self. Um, Having children to transmit moral values to those children is a source of affection. Having someone to love. It's fun, stimulating and fun. A lot of people want to have kids because they like kids. Um, it's an achievement. Like, well, it's time in my life for me to have kids. Um, Power and influence. This doesn't mean that people sit down and they say, I really want to control somebody, so I'm going to have kids. But there is an aspect of kind of having two kids that brings a person a feeling of completion. Like, well, now I'm a family person. I'm an upstanding member of my community. I have, of my extended family. Now I'm like a grown up, and that's what's meant there by power and influence. Social comparison. People start to feel like, well, everybody else is having kids. We should get on that, and get to that. And economic utility. People feel like, well, now I can afford to have children, and I'm ready, and I will support my children, and they will, we will support one another, and now we're able to afford that. So these are some of the reasons that people report that they become parents. Here are some of the emotional responses that we see in parents when they look at their lives and their children's lives, and they try to figure out, well, how am I doing? How are my kids doing? We see that parents often feel guilt, often. Even parents that maybe you would look and you would think, oh, why would you feel guilty? But parents do feel guilty. They feel like, oh, I wish I had more time to spend with my child, or oh, I wish I had been able to play with my child instead of do that thing, or I wish I had more money, or I wish I had more time, or I wish I hadn't said that, or I wish I wasn't, crabby, or I wish we weren't always rushed off in the morning. There's guilt is a big part of the parenting experience. This is very well documented in the research, and again, it's something that I'm sure rings home for many of us as we read through this chapter. Anger. Anger is an emotional responsive parent. It's impossible to go through life and never become angry, but there are a lot of things that are very frustrating and anger making when you're a parent, whether it's toward another child, how that child has treated your child, or how another adult has treated your child, or some rule, or even your child, him or herself, when they've done something that you just did not expect them to do. Of course, love. Love is the, overwhelming, emotion and instinct that many that parents have toward their children. Anxiety, because everybody knows that you only get one shot at raising your child, and everybody knows that if you mess it up, um, that it's that you can't really go back and change it. I think it was Jacqueline Kennedy who said, well, if you bungle parenting, then nothing else much matters. And people know that, and it does create anxiety because you don't want to make a mistake, right? But yet we all make mistakes, and many of those are attributable, I suppose, to frustration and exhaustion, which are listed for you next. It is exhausting and can be very frustrating. Here are some of the roles that parents play in their lives. Parents have to be nurturers. We know about the importance of attachment and the importance of fathers and mothers as nurturers, and so parents do want to nurture their children. They are playing that role. The nurturing role can be costly sometimes. There are moments for all parents that they just don't feel like tying another shoe or wiping another nose, that they're just tired, and nurturing, in as much as everybody wants to do that well, it is sometimes quite an exhausting experience, and this is an important role that parents do play, is the one of nurture. Parents are also navigating their own adult relationships. They may be partners or spouses. Having children tends to be oftentimes pressure on a marriage. In fact, the lowest point of marital satisfaction is usually when couples have young children. There's an aspect of sleep, the kind of strain on income, and so there's sort of a valley that hits when you look at a chart after couples have young children, because it's just such a stressful time. So it often places some kind of strain on marital relationships, and folks can, successfully navigate through it a lot of times. But anyway, it is not effortless. It's a strain. Also, folks are navigating their own kind of individual roles, their lifelong personal development. They're thinking, oh my goodness, I'm such and such age, and what does that mean for me? Is this who I meant to be when I grew up? Is this where I thought I'd be at this age? Erickson talked about that. It talked about adult stages. He's given us children's ages and stages, but adults also have stages and certain kind of places that we expect to be at different stages, and we have to navigate that as individuals at the same time that we're doing all of these other things and this, you know, all-consuming other roles that we have. We're workers. Oftentimes there are conflicts between work and parenting. Most any working parent has experienced this. What do you do on a snow day? What do you do when your child is sick? How do you do this? You don't want to look like a shirker at work, but you don't want to send your kid to school sick. But it's this conflict that's so difficult to deal with. And sometimes parents will, as you know, send their child into school sick. And sometimes children will tell you, oh, I had the pink medicine this morning, and I had a fever, but my mommy said I had to come to work today. Then it's because parents are trying to navigate all of these different things, and they're thinking, well, I don't want to lose my job, and I don't know what else to do with my child, or maybe, so it's that. It's not a desire to get you as teacher sick. It's not because people don't care that they might get other people sick. It's because sometimes folks are just very stressed out and really trying to manage all of these roles. We don't have a lot of great options for working parents, particularly for sick care. There are a few sick care drop-offs, but group care is, for sick kids is pretty hard to find. It's very, it's expensive, it's out of the way, and oftentimes not even ideal really for the child. When you're sick, you want to be home in bed, and so it's a very complicated issue. And parents are consumers. They want to be able to buy bread and buy clothes and buy a roof over their head, and for that reason, we often have dual income households, as I mentioned earlier in the lecture. The cost of raising a child is substantial, and so parents are also consumers trying to kind of make their dollar stretch just like everybody else. Your book talks about the child care trilemma, which is instead of dilemma, which would indicate two things. It's the need for quality care. Everybody wants their children to be in quality care. Nobody says, wow, I want to find somebody that won't pay attention to my child at all and drop them off there. Everybody wants quality care for their kids. And but yet everybody wants it to also be affordable. And if you want it to be high quality and affordable, then it's got to be a place that also compensates the staff really well, because after all, appropriate compensation for staff is one of the things that keeps staff there instead of having high staff turnover, which is an indicator that it's not quality care. And so it's a very difficult conundrum, because we want to have high quality care and we want it to be affordable, and we want it to be somewhere that the staff get paid, because then it'll be high quality care. So it's a pretty difficult issue for working parents. And parents are educators. Parents are their children's first teachers, and they're working through their own things that they want to teach children. People have different parenting styles. Some people are more authoritarian, which is sort of very kind of strict. We call it like the top down model, like the military. You've got like one person kind of in charge, and there's not necessarily a lot of dialogue. It's not really a democracy. It may be a benevolent dictatorship, but it's certainly not a democracy. Permissive parenting tends to be more liberal. There are far less restrictions in terms of how things are negotiated. Children have more freedom. And then authoritative is supposed to be the thing that's in the middle of that. So children have enough boundaries to feel safe, because children do need boundaries. They're not equipped to make all of their decisions, and we cannot seek their feedback on each and everything because they're children and we're the grown-ups. Sometimes we have to decide. So authoritative does have some boundaries, but it also has very high levels of warmth and affection, and so children do feel loved and nurtured, where authoritarian is very low in that nurturing and very high on boundaries, and permissive is very low on boundaries and very high in nurturing, and authoritative is very high in nurturing and high in having boundaries or structure. What's interesting about this is that almost all parents perceive themselves to be authoritative parents. Even folks that are very, very permissive will say, oh yes, I have an authoritative parenting style. I high warmth, and I absolutely have boundaries. I would never let my 3-year-old drive a car. But I have lots of boundaries. And so it's funny, we all we all perceive ourselves this way. And so I think it's very humbling to remember that if everyone else is not is perceiving themselves to be authoritative when they might not necessarily be, then probably we also are not perceiving ourselves correctly either. Parents also are responsible for socializing children, preparing them to learn how to interact with the world. If somebody hits you, are you supposed to hit back, or are you supposed to tell the teacher? These are messages that children get from parents. Do we say please and thank you? Do we wait until an adult is done speaking, or do we walk right up? Like it's little stuff like that that is all part of our socialization. When we greet people, do we kiss them on both cheeks, or do we bow, or do we politely shake hands? All of that is taught by parents. And then preparation for formal schooling as well. That's an aspect of it too.